Well, good day. Today is ooh, the, could it be? Yes, the 13th of May, 2021. And today I'm going to do another one on one of the military investigative services. We've already done the Army, CID, the Navy, NCIS, and today we're going to do the Air Force, Office of Special Investigations. And one thing that might surprise you, obviously when a young man or woman graduates from Air Force Academy or AFROTC or OCS, they get a lieutenant's commission. And it shouldn't surprise anyone. The first thing that most officers who are going in the Air Force, their first career field choice is being a pilot of some sort. But it would surprise you that the second career choice is the Office of Special Investigations. Only a very small number of officers are selected. The vast majority of OSI special agents in the U.S. Air Force are enlisted servicemen and women. So in order to get into this program, you're selected from the ranks of enlisted. They're already in the Air Force. They do not have to be in the security forces or what the other branches would call military police. So this is something that's different from the Army. In the Army, you're able to enlist and go into CID with a guarantee if you have a college degree. The Air Force, no. The Air Force, you're selected from any number of AFSCs, but you put in for it, and if you're selected, you go through a background investigation, a polygraph, and then they go to an academy at Glencoe, Georgia. And the academy teaches them basic criminal investigative techniques. Now, what is it that the Air Force Office of Special Investigations does? And the Air Force, just like any branch of the service or any military, is a microcosm of larger society. Now, one positive aspect is that it's the men and women who enlist in the military are of a higher caliber than the average person walking the street. The average 18-year-old is not eligible today to enlist. Now, 40 years ago, they took anybody, trust me. But nowadays, because of medical issues, arrest record, drug use, medication that a person might be on, largely obesity, is a big determinant to turn people away. But, the military gets a pretty good selection of people overall. And if a person isn't working out, they let them go with what's called an administrative discharge. So what does the Air Force Office of Special Investigations work on? And one primary area of concern is fraud, contractor fraud. And then there are crimes that are just committed by stupid crimes, committed by service members. A lot of times, I can point you to some of the most famous cases, and one of the most famous cases that they worked, this goes way back actually, it's the Wayback Machine, just as the all-volunteer military was getting its start. It involved an off-base robbery of a hi-fi store in Ogden, Utah by 3 individuals who were enlisted men in the Air Force. And the crime was particularly heinous. They made the victims in the store drink Drano because they had seen a movie named Magnum Force. I don't know if this was a Clint Eastwood flick, but somebody had to drink supposedly Drano. They made them do that. And 3 of the victims died. 1 suffered severe brain damage and was unable to testify. But the Air Force, these guys brought the stolen stuff back to their barracks, and OSI helped with the local police, and they recovered the stolen material. 2 of the 3 men were convicted in Utah criminal court and sentenced to death. They didn't opt for the firing squad, but they did get lethal injection. So it was a serious case. It's still taught at the FBI Academy. So that was something that took place in April of 1974. Much more recently, they're involved in cases where people just try to beat the system on supply, and their garage is full of stuff that they're not supposed to have. A fairly recent case involved a master sergeant, which I guess is an E7, and he had 19 and a half years of service, and he got into a fight with his wife, which if you're involved in crime, never do this, because in DEA, their wives would, DEA cases, their wives would turn in their husbands on suspicion of drug dealing. And you have to strike while the iron is hot before they decide they love them again. But they say, he's got dope in the basement or whatever. They want to get the husband because they're so ticked off at him. But he had stolen a topographical map that was worth $13,000. Then she says, "Do you want other stuff that belongs to the Air Force?" And when the OFSI agents were there, they said, "Sure." And the garage was full of stolen material. He had built the Air Force out of like $400,000 worth of equipment. And of course, I wonder if she was disappointed when he got reduced to E1 and was given a dishonorable discharge and 8 years in prison. But that's for another story. But so do I recommend it? Yes. I mean, it's if you're in the military and you want to go into investigations, this will give you the requisite experience if you want to go to civilian employment, or if you just want to stay in the military. And I think the Air Force is a great option to be in. I think they take better care of their enlisted than other branches. Now, what kind of work do they mostly do? And to answer this, I looked at the court-martial blogs, basically. If you know that the Air Force Court of Criminal Appeals and the Court of Appeals for the Armed Forces, they publish opinions on cases that they've decided. And you can look at these pages, and I'm going to do that right now. We'll look at the pages and see what type of crimes tend to be committed most frequently. Okay, let's do that. All right, the first one of these is involving a former service member named Clarence Jones, who was convicted of assaulting his former wife. His wife, former wife, enlisted in the Air Force. He had been in the Air Force while she was in boot camp. They gave her a class of what constituted sexual harassment. She reported him. AFOSI took his computer and his cell phone and figured out, yes, he may have done what she said. So he got prosecuted, reduced to E1, sent to time in the brig, and given a bad discharge. The second one of these, and these are just random, he's a cadet at the Air Force, or was a cadet, he ain't anymore, at the Air Force Academy. And he, like a lot of young people do, I would never have done anything like this, he got drunk. Okay, and he got drunk with a female cadet, and God knows what happened, but she came to the next day, and she wasn't too certain what happened, but her friend told her to report him because the military it strongly encourages this kind of reporting at this point in time. And instead of this first sergeant just calling them in, hitting their heads together, saying, "You two idiots shouldn't get so drunk, you don't know what you're doing," they brought her to a hospital, did a test on her. Yes, she had engaged in sexual intercourse. Then AFOSI had her send a text message to him, and he apologized. Well, he got 75 days in the brig and dismissed, and now he's a sex offender, so go figure. Surprised they went after someone in the Air Force Academy, to be quite honest, but still, I think it's, when you get he said, she said kind of thing, this is the type of thing that's way below the radar of a police department or a federal agency, but something that if you are in a military investigative agency, you're going to have to investigate. Why? Because the officers' careers depend, your commander's careers depend on being responsive to allegations. Okay. The third one is a guy who was involved in child porn. He had some on his computer. His wife turned him in, and they got a hold of his computer with the police department. The police department had to do with a warrant. Why? Because AFOSI has no authority. They're enlisted personnel. They can't serve search warrants or get warrants for people's houses in the community, but the local PD did. They submitted the images to the Defense Department Cyber Lab, and he was convicted of having child porn and was given a bad conduct discharge and time in prison, which, I think he should have. But again, these are cases that fall below the radar, we would say, of a usual law enforcement agency, and but will not fall below the radar of any military investigative agency. One good thing about the Air Force OSI is that they're allowed to, this includes enlisted, select which weapon they want to carry. So that's good. Typically in the military, they just give you what they give you, and you have to take it. But now there's a list of approved handguns. You can buy your own weapon and carry your own weapon, which is good. I think that's great. They've lost more agents than I think any other military investigative agency, and that's because they do a lot of combat zone deployments. A number of them have been killed in Afghanistan and in Iraq. And again, because the Air Force really doesn't have a large ground combat component, mostly would be security, police, but they go out actually and work in the field and recover evidence when they have to, and this places them at risk. So do I think it's a good calling? Yeah, absolutely. If you want to become a civilian federal agent, like in the FBI or something like that, would the experience that they give you be relevant? Absolutely. Again, the level of crime is lower than what a civilian cop is used to working, or a federal agent. And that's just because you have good people in the military. It looks like a cool agency, so go ahead and join if you are in the Air Force, if you're ready in the Air Force. So hopefully it's been useful and informative. Thank you.